Asuras Wrath is a hard game to classify. I guess, in a sense, it's a beat-em-up, but then again, it's also an on-rail shooter. And what people know it as most, it's essentially one big long quick-time event. Personally, I think calling the game any of these things, or to try to pigeonhole it into a genre in general, would actually be to do the game a disservice. Let me explain. Developed by Capcom and released in 2012 on the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, Asuras Wrath was developed using Unreal Engine 3, which is one of only 5 games developed by Capcom using the engine. The game promised an interactive anime and gaming experience for that matter like the world had never seen. Now that's not to say the games that were made up mostly of cutscenes hadn't come before it, but very few had focused so heavily on style and scale, aesthetic and scope, to the extent that Asuras Wrath was attempting. Trying to explain the story of Asuras Wrath is a difficult task. In a way, you could say that there are actually 2 stories being told here. One would be the story of Asura. He's one of the 8 Guardian Generals, assigned with the task of protecting humanity from the Goma, which are a strange monster, demon type thing. He is framed for the murder of the Emperor, and his daughter is kidnapped because her spiritual energy can enhance the performance of those said 8 Guardian Generals. Asura's personal story is rather simple. It's essentially just his struggle to save his daughter. This could easily be taken as another case of the damsel in distress trope that everyone loves complaining about, but it's conveyed in a much more subtle and personal manner than it's dealt with in most games. Asura himself doesn't have a lot to him, as his character is pretty much limited to being either angry or confused. The developers stated that the reason they wanted to focus on the anger as a motif for the character was because they wanted something that everyone can relate to. And while I've never been so mad that I've sprouted extra arms, I do think that they succeed in what they set out to do with the character. The second story, and the one I've found to be more interesting, was the story of the planet itself. The game takes place on a planet called Gaia, which is inhabited by humans, and these humans are supposed to be protected from the Goma by the 8 Guardian Generals. Over the length of the game, great periods of time are skipped, and every time that time resumes, the world is completely different. And with the game revolving around Asura, his decisions and actions continually change the course of the planet. I found it rather interesting seeing how the inhabitants of the planet dealt with the ramifications of Asura's attempts to save his daughter. These environmental story elements were never dragged into the foreground, which I think was the right choice, and it helped keep Asura's personal story focused, but added to the overall experience. The gameplay in Asuras Wrath is a mixed bag. It's somewhat ironic that the game is at its worst when it's treating itself as a game. I know that sounds a little strange, but I'll try to explain what I mean. The game is basically spread up into very particular segments. You have your rail shooting stages, which are found to be the most enjoyable in terms of pure gameplay. These segments, while relatively shallow, allow for a great deal of spectacle and make up a number of the most memorable sequences in the game. It's fast and it feels good, never really getting old despite how repetitive it is. The next major element of gameplay is the most involved, but also the most underbaked. These are the brawler sequences that just have you wailing on the same enemies over and over throughout the game. While I do give them props for at least trying to make things interesting visually by making Asura's attack animation specific to how many limbs he has, the whole combat system feels very generic and there aren't really a lot of combos or reasons to use combos in the first place, outside of the rating system at the end of each stage. That's not to say that the combat is bad or anything like that, but the progression you feel in the game is dictated by the story and not by you improving as a player, which, along with the limited number of enemies, can make these sequences feel quite repetitive and dull. The game even makes the horrible mistake of making you face off against the same bosses numerous times. It's bad enough that these bosses aren't all that exciting in the first place, but making you fight them multiple times is a pain in the arse and messes with the flow of the game, which is otherwise pretty spot on. But while it's annoying to be sure, it's also not really a deal breaker by any means. Lastly, there are the infamous QuickTime events that make up the large majority of the game. These are what will either make or break the game for most people. For me personally, I quite enjoyed these sequences. They allowed for a level of spectacle and scale that would not be possible if they attempted to convey these sections in any other way. I will admit that there is little to no punishment for missing a button prompt, which creates a bit of a disconnect between you as the player and what you're seeing on the screen, and I can also see how that would annoy a lot of players, but it didn't bother me particularly because I knew it meant I wouldn't have to repeat any sequences. QuickTime events are a touchy subject even now. Some people hate them, other people love them. Me personally, I fall on the middle ground, and to me it's all about context. There are certainly a lot of games out there that annoy me when they force me into a QuickTime event, but with Asuras Wrath being built around the concept, I think it has fun with it, and the end result, while possibly not as intimate as it could be, is still generally a lot of fun to experience. The game has incredibly distinctive visuals, which was surprising to me, as I generally find most games made using the Unreal Engine 3 engine to have a particular look, with even cel-shaded games like Borderlands looking obviously developed in the engine. The anime styling of the game is no doubt the first thing people will notice about the visuals, but it all goes so much deeper than that. While the general art direction of the game is certainly incredibly strong, it's the game's sheer sense of scale that truly separates it from other games made with the toolkit. I honestly believe Asuras Wrath is one of the best looking games of the last generation, not just in terms of art direction, but also colour, tone and textural feel to be made with not just the Unreal Engine 3, but the entirety of the last generation, and I expect the game will age very well in that sense. The music too is absolutely first rate. While it could be said it possibly reuses the same handful of melodies a little too often, you would be hard pressed to fault it in any other way. It's diverse, it's foreboding, it's exciting, and at times it's just plain old fun. It was composed by Chikayo Fukuda, who up until that point had mainly composed for the Dot Hack series. It's unfortunate then that she hasn't worked on anything since. Once Orphan Wolf Legend gets stuck in your head, it's not going away. I chose to play through the game in Japanese, so I can't comment on the quality of the English voice work, but rest assured, in Japanese at least, you're in for a top-notch audio experience, with all of the lines delivered with an appropriate sense of strength and gravity, with very few grating character voices, save for this spider. So I hope you understand why I personally found Asuras Wrath to be a hard game to critique. On a surface level, if you were to critique it purely as a video game, it would be very easy to be overly harsh to it. But if you try to critique it purely as what the creators set out to design, which is an interactive experience, it would be quite easy to shower it endlessly with praise. In the end, I think it's a game that will be different things to different people, and unlike most other games on the market, what it actually is will depend entirely on the attitude of the player. Is Asuras Wrath a game I would recommend to just anyone? No, not at all. It's an experience that I think most people are either going to love or they're going to hate. While its gameplay is relatively weak, I don't think that necessarily makes it a bad game. It's an experience and an experiment, and a unique one at that. Rather than give the game a flat-out recommendation, I'm going to say if you like the look of the footage you have seen, and you think you might have a passing interest in the game, pick it up when you can. However, if you're the sort of person who hates beat-em-ups or excessive QuickTime events, then I would recommend giving this game a pass. Wouldn't do anything to change your mind. There are a few other experiences out there like Asuras Wrath, but it's not an experience for everybody.